We are live, it looks like. I think that's right. And um it's Monday. We've had a massive snowstorm. Well, not that massive, actually. We have a foot of snow. What would you say? About a
Yeah,
foot.
maybe a little more than a foot, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. They thought it was going to be 16 to 22 inches, so it wasn't that bad. And it was,
And did come during church, so that was
yes, that was the bad part, is that everyone heard it was coming, and so people stayed home from church. We had about 50 something people in the church.
yeah, that we had
It's the size of
at
the
eight
church when I
o'clock.
first got here.
Yeah,
So, about 48, 50 people.
yeah,
So, um, it was very sad. You guys, great to have people there, but it was sad, very
yeah.
sad that people,
Well, we had a good time.
yeah, we had a good time. It's hard to preach to 50 people when you're used to preaching to more in that room.
Yeah.
It's I don't know.
It it's a
Every,
huge room for, I
everyone's
mean,
spread
we
apart.
had 33 people or something at
Oh,
10:30
the 10:30, right, right.
and 16 at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So uh, when you have a room that seats 400 or something, 300, it's kind of, I try to get people to move up, but the people who sit in the back sat in the back.
Remember when we first moved in there, we put ropes in the back so no one could,
Yeah,
because it was like a
it's,
huge number of people in the very
yeah,
back. Ready at
yeah,
home.
yeah. It's really bad. So now people are trying to shovel out. It's not as cold as it could be. I thought it would be a lot colder.
They said it was gonna be colder. It was, they said it was gonna struggle to get up into the double digits today, but it's good. See,
It's okay. Yeah,
it feels warmer than they say it would.
it feels a lot warmer.
Yeah.
But then it's been super cold, so there you
Right.
are.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we've been good. We've walked to the gym and then walked back. So now we're here, and there's so much news, and none of it is very good or nice. So I had two things. I thought there was a wonderful, Kristen sent me a wonderful Roger Scruton clip that I thought maybe we could talk about, even though I don't know how to play it. So we'll just have to describe what he says, and then I'll link the clip. And then I started reading Christianity and Liberalism again by J. Gresham Machen or Macon or however you want to say it, which I
Right.
read 25 years ago.
You didn't like it then.
I
Instead
think
of
I just assumed that it was true and I didn't understand what his big deal was. Now
we were right there in the middle of the liberal seminary though, and you were reading it, and you didn't see.
I did. I mean, I did on some level for
Okay.
sure, but I thought he was being really reactionary. It's actually a really good book for those who haven't read it yet. But there was a passage that I read that I thought was exactly on point to describe what happened in uh, the people that went into the church last week. I guess the official word is protest. I'm not sure what it's being called.
Yeah.
And and then I guess more information has come out that they were really menacing people and children, that parents couldn't get to their
They
children.
wouldn't let their parents get their kids out of Sunday school. They were like, I mean, so no, it was not just a uh, peaceful protest. It was a occupation,
And
takeover
intimidation.
building, right? Intimidation, right? Exactly. So, I know that two of them were arrested and then released. Um, so hopefully there'll be a trial there, not just a,
That
uh,
nothing will happen.
yeah, they shouldn't be on the street.
Well, so, and the thing about it that interests me, I said this last week, is that they were talking about Jesus. Like they
Yeah,
have some claim or stake in the name of Jesus. I don't think necessarily they would claim to be Christians, but they thought that they had the right to tell Christians what they believe, what the Christians believe, and how therefore they should act. And the
Yeah.
aggression with which that happened, I thought was really interesting, given, of course, we live in a pluralist society, so everybody can do and say whatever they want. I mean,
Well, people get
that,
little
then,
snippets of Jesus, don't they? I mean, people get like, "Oh, Jesus, he said judge not. So what are you doing judging me? Stop
yeah,
judging." So then they know. I mean, that's uh, Jesus cared for the stranger and the refugee or whatever. Jesus, God wants us to care for the refugee. Yes, absolutely, that's true. It's in there. But if you're going to use like Levitical law, um, here's the problem with taking Bible passages willy nilly and throwing them at the present news cycle. Right? Is that um, there is a category for sojourner in the Old Testament, and there are responsibilities that the Israelite has to care for the person who's sojourning in the land or who's a resident alien in the land. But what's missed often is there's also responsibilities in the part of the resident alien. Like you can't. Um, so if we're going to use that context for understanding our situation, I think we should use the entire context. Um,
the resident alien, for example, couldn't worship Baal or
yeah,
sacrifice their
you
children to Molech.
exactly. You could not bring your own demon gods into into Israel.
Of course, everybody did, but
Right, but that was not permitted. You had to obey. You had to obey the ceremonial laws, but you had to obey the. You couldn't, you know, all the other laws and laws we would call moral. They were obligated to follow. You couldn't, and it wasn't a situation where people were um, sneaking into Israel and then uh, stealing other people's stuff and living off the proceeds. It was if you're a resident alien, there are obligations that you have to follow. And if we were gonna, if we're so I mean I'm for that. If we're gonna have I
well, it
um,
doesn't apply because Americans are sacrificing their children to Moloch
right,
wholesale.
right,
So, like, the
right,
context is already like ruined.
yeah. So I mean, obviously, you know, I don't know what to think about the most recent shooting, except to say that if you uh, it's not happening, and it's not this kind of thing is not happening in the other states where the police and law enforcement officials are cooperating with ICE. You don't have this kind of chaos and people getting shot. You only have it where there's a paid agitators who are pushing it and uh, trying to interfere and obstruct. And it's very sad. I think that this person was shot this um, last week, and that so Rebecca Good. I can't remember her first name.
Renee.
What Renee Good, who was shot the week before. But if in a chaotic situation where law enforcement backs off, and ICE isn't trained to do crowd control. That's not their thing. They're trained to there's going to be this kind of terrible thing. Which should be investigated, and if there's some wrongdoing on the part of the officers, they need to be held accountable. Um, uh, but I think that the greatest responsibility lies with um, the civil magistrates in Minneapolis and in Minnesota who are not only not trying to help um, the federal government, but they're actually obstructing. Doing they're supporting the the protests, um, and it's just absolute chaos that doesn't have to be. It's very sad.
Somebody's at the door.
Kristen McGuire says 100,000 peaceful marchers were in Washington D.C. and no tear gas was necessary. Right, that was the March for Life. I think that's referring to. Um,
Oh, right. Right.
yeah, which was
Right on cue. I'm assuming the dogs are right on cue.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I, I, I'm deeply conflicted in my soul because I, it's so ugly. Like what's going on in Minnesota is so ugly. I can see people recoiling from the optics of ICE being there. And um, and I think we've been trained to uh, like as a population and a culture to react quickly, and obviously like there's deep terrible things going on in that city, and in our culture in general, but it's like that's a good icon. Whatever's happening there is a good picture of where we are spiritually. And it is an interesting contrast to have that going on there and then to have the March for Life. Like I think I say this every year, but you can't kill off a huge amount of your own population on purpose before they are born and expect it to go well in other realms. Like I feel like there's always a direct line between committed abortion culture, the ease with which we can get the pill now in our own administration that doesn't seem to have a problem with having this easy access to that medicine. It's not a medicine, that poison. And the conflagration in the streets, the huge number of people who have come here from other places expecting certain things that they're not getting. And then the way that here's my problem with immigration is the way that that population is used in American politics. I grew up in as a resident alien in somebody else's country. And we had to jump through so many hoops to live there and be allowed to live there. And it was precarious. If an American hit a Malian with a car, that happened to a missionary, and he went to jail in Mali, for a long time, it was very dicey what would happen to him. It's like if you go to, Singapore and chew gum and throw it down, you're going to jail. Doesn't matter. You know, it's precarious to live abroad in somebody else's country. So it's incredibly wicked to me that we have on purpose brought huge numbers of people to America in order to use them in our political processes as weapons against each other, essentially.
Yeah.
That's like the worst kind of utilitarianism. It's so ungodly. It's not the resident alien and sojourner laws that apply in this case. It's like we started killing each other and ourselves. And then to justify ourselves, we bring in other people to misuse. And so now we're fighting in the streets, like,
Well, it was, the purpose of, so there's a debate, when you watch these things on TV, you have one side saying, well, they're not just rounding up illegal people who are here illegally, they're rounding up people who are here illegally. And the other side says, well, uh, no, it's just illegals. And one of the problems is the definition here, because um, what was happening under the Biden administration is just masses of people were coming in, and then they would be given papers. They would be given, um, without going through any real process. They'd be given uh, kind of a legal status, kind of declared. Um, I forgot what the name of it was, but uh, and many of them would be given Social Security numbers so they could receive benefits. Right? And then, but that once you have a Social Security number, you can also vote. Which is, I'm sorry, don't I can't believe that that's not the whole point. I cannot believe that was not the whole purpose. Um, the people born here, whether we're whatever color of skin, have not been supportive of major democratic or leftist positions like transing children and no bail for criminal, or bail for easy out for crime. Most of the things that the left runs on, people here are not happy about. And so what do? Well, you import a whole new population and you make them give them your voter, put them on the voting rolls. I mean, I just, it's so blatant what's happened. And you're right. They're using a whole group of people, and worse, you're hurting the poor of our own country. Right? We have uh, the goods and services that are set aside to help the Americans who are impoverished. um, to keep supporting that with this large number of people who are here quasi legally, the millions of people who are here quasi legally, it's a huge burden on the system, and ultimately the American people who are in need are going to bear the brunt of that, and the middle class who has to pay huge amount of taxes to support it. So it's just it's a I mean I'm not a I was about to say I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I believe a lot of conspiracies now. So um,
Well,
some argue that this is intentionally to break the system so that everybody needs to be dependent um,
on the state.
on the state, right?
Well, so I mean, I guess I don't. I feel like people can be really, really upset about ICE. I feel like you could be deeply angry with this particular administration and previous ones. You don't have to be on the side of the government.
Yep.
For me, what was interesting is the appeal to Jesus in the midst of all this. Like, we aren't in any way approximate to the will of God for individuals or lives or um, any, like, we're really, really far away from any biblically based system of government. Maybe we're more like the Roman Empire. So, that's fine. But we have to live as Christians in a time of chaos. And I I'm on the side of kind of peacefully doing that and not attracting any attention whatsoever to myself. But if the protesters show up because they're angry with you and they're screaming at you about what you are supposed to believe, they do have a conception uh, of God or spirituality that they're misapplying. And they were able, so the part that brings Machen in, is it Macon or Machen?
Nation, I think.
Machen sounds wrong to me somehow. Is the reason that they're able to do that though is because of progressivism in the church for a long time. Like he's writing because already when did this come out? 1923. Uh, my copy's from 1999. Um, they had been a concerted effort to separate doctrine and the content of the Christian faith from the historicity of Jesus. So you get this sort of Christ figure, this like which you can see Richard Rohr talking about today. Like at work, I think we're kind of familiar with it now, but back in the 20s, people were probably shocked by what he was saying to one degree or another. But if you separate, the death and resurrection of Jesus are facts that are taking place in history, and that's necessary part. You cannot take away the death and resurrection of Jesus and say that you don't have to believe in that. Our internet connection is unstable, so I don't know what that's doing to. And somebody's pushing love for everything that we're
Yeah.
saying, which is beautiful. Um, but progressivism wants to say you don't need the historical. You can do the Rob Bell, like how much of the content can you get rid of and still have all you need? Um, you can do that. That's
Well,
one thing. And then at the same time you alter the doctrine, which is a kind of doctrinal thing to do. You say, okay, maybe Jesus died. He didn't rise again, and he didn't die for your sins. And so that's the Jesus that most people in American society are probably familiar and comfortable with, because that's been a thing that people did on purpose for 100 years. And if you said that Jesus died on the cross for your sins, you were a wacko fundamentalist. If you joined the history and the doctrine together to get the real Christ, you were a sicko fundamentalist Southern Baptist who deserve to have their church
Well, yeah, I
involved.
mean, Jesus, the name Jesus still has a lot of cultural cachet
Yeah.
in our society, and it has it always has. So, but that's paired with a complete lack of understanding of who Jesus is. Um, then you're going to get everyone pouring all their ideas of what they think is virtuous and good into the name Jesus, and then you have people screaming at the people in the church about Jesus and what he would do and where he would be. He wouldn't be in church, of course,
Yeah.
they say, although ironically, there he is. But this goes back. There's this distinction between like in seminary. I'm not sure you remember, but we read a book by a kind of I forgot his name, but he was in the school of the German New Testament critics, the Christ of faith and the Jesus of history. You remember this?
Yeah.
Okay, so because the idea there was that the Christ of faith is this other thing than the Jesus of history. The Christ of faith is the creation of the church. The Jesus of history is the real historical Jesus, who we just got to get down into the brass tacks and find by our historical research. But clearly, he can't be who the Gospels say he is. Um, so let's see.
There's
The
a lot of comments. You should probably go up, I think, because there's a bunch. I think we passed by.
MA said those fraudulently receiving welfare funds and sending to overseas. Yep, yep. We they are doing that definitely. OPC. Oh yeah, he's OPC Goat, Grace of All Time. He's talking about nation. That was Daniel. And then someone says greeting from Gambia. Thank you. And then Joel Gunderson said, Paul's is say I'm right, Nation. That's how you say it,
Okay,
Nation.
Machen.
I don't know. This is Joel Gunderson. I don't know. The Jesus movement in the 60s was pretty pervasive and did insist on the historical and risen Jesus. That's true. And repentance and all that. Yeah. The Jesus movement was fairly orthodox and almost, well, it was completely orthodox, I think, except for maybe this non standard way of expressing worship and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, you had Chuck Smith come out of that or became very prominent after that. And even John MacArthur had a bunch of Jesus people in his church. But I think the Jesus movement um, was. I think we're talking about more how liberal Christianity became what it is, and
Yeah.
I do think there's an investment on the part of liberal uh, liberal theology to be as skeptical as possible about the historical Jesus while pouring whatever meaning you can or want into the Christ figure, and divorcing the two. But it goes back, it goes back to Cerinthius, like the Gnostics. The Gnostics also didn't want the historical Jesus because the historical Jesus was a real man, and uh, he why would you he who lived, he was
Grotesque.
born, yeah, and he why would he rose from the dead and in his body? No, that's horrible. So this Cerinthius, one of the main Gnostics, decided he's the first one I think to come up with this formulation that uh, this early second century, I think. Jesus was a man, just a man. He was a he was a good guy, I guess, but he was just a man, not virgin birth, because why would that matter? Because the body doesn't matter. But the fact that we have bodies is part of the fall itself, because we were given bodies by the evil demiurge who is in rebellion against the rest of the pleroma. Depth into that. I'm teaching on Gnosticism right now. Um, so as baptism, that's when the Christ Spirit sent from the great God to save us from our flesh. That's when the Christ Spirit inhabited Jesus, and at the end, in his crucifixion, the Christ Spirit departed and never came back. So, and the Christ Spirit
That's
came to show us how to, huh?
into the body of Richard Rohr.
Yeah. right, to liberate it, to show us how to be liberated from our bodies. And if you know, if you gain knowledge about the true Jesus, not the Jesus of the Gospels, but the Gnostic Jesus, then you can get the way to transcend the limitations of your body, because you really are a spirit person in within. There's so much about Gnosticism that this is reemerging now in the 21st century and in the 20th century. But you're really you don't know this, but you are a good, bright, shining, shimmering. Your inner self is a shimmering goddess or god, an aeon emanated from the great God. Um, and so you have the problem is you just don't know that. You don't know how. You don't know your divinity, and you've got to figure out. You got to figure that out. And once you know it, once you figure out you're divine, then you get to live in accordance with your divinity. It's all there, and it's all there in like the Gnostics, and it's being regurgitated now. So,
Well, so
Albert Schweitzer is another one of these guys who
yeah,
differentiated the Christ from the Jesus of history. Albert Schweitzer, I think, was the one who started the historical Jesus movement, trying to figure out how. No, there's a guy earlier that went on earlier than him, but he was one of the main figures, I believe, in the 19th century. So, or maybe the 20th.
yeah. Well, I can't remember what else I was going to talk about. Uh, I uh oh
Mation.
well the huh?
You were connecting Mation to the
Yeah, I mean
person
I
in
think
the church.
the people who went to the church to yell at everybody, um, it just I mean the inevitable, I guess. I feel like what Machen is saying, the inevitable product or consequence of separating the two is probably people screaming at Christians for being the wrong kind of Christians. You know, you don't get. I think the people who would originally wanted to do this wanted to assume they were going to get peace, justice in the American way. Like we would have a more peaceful society if you could just get rid of um, those bad people who believe that Jesus died on the cross for their sins. Um, then we could really get past narrow-mindedness. But what actually happens is you get the total desecration of everything. Like the person is desecrated, the church is desecrated, babies are desecrated, marriage is desecrated, the city streets are desecrated. Everything becomes very, very ugly when you jettison this sort of underpinning of the cosmos, which is that Jesus died on the cross for our sins. And uh,
Well, and yeah, I mean, without the gospel being the genuine historical record of who Jesus is and what he's done in his earthly ministry and what he's going to do when he returns, yeah, then if you shear Christ off from Jesus, then he just becomes whatever is he's the Christ of the Zeitgeist. You just
yeah, he like he's the spirit of the age.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but I mean, the idea that a person is worth anything, which is kind of what everybody is fighting about. You know, who's worth anything? If you can just uh, killing somebody randomly in the streets, or killing your infant, or whatever. Like no, nothing. People desperately want worth to be the person to be at the center of this discussion. And that's what the empathy that's being used to be like, don't you care? Don't you care about people dying? Well, everybody cares about that. Like, but you guys were the ones that said nobody was worth anything. So to back up and get worth the worth of the person back, if you really want the Imago Dei to function in, culture as a thing, it didn't come from you. it was given as a gift from God who made the person. Um, and uh, so, it's a great irony. It's interesting to watch people screaming about how Christians should care about the deaths of people when they actually do. They really do. That's why they went to church that Sunday. You know,
Yeah.
they, you're accusing them of the thing that you yourself believe. Um, I
So
yeah,
Kristen McGuire says, or I'm sorry, John Westa says Richard Rohr's Cosmic Christ. Yeah, it's another like reaching back for Gnostic categories. Absolutely. And then Chris McGuire says it sounds very Hindu. Yep. Um, there's an interesting connection, I think, between Eastern philosophy, religion with Gnostic thought, um, and how that's kind of flowed into the modern liberal theology. Um, so Daniel says 100%. I guess
forget what we were saying this time.
yeah, yeah. Daniel also says, without the doctrine of the Trinity, there is no grounds for identity or differentiation, um, or relationship. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the reason, for eternity, there's been Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one being, of course, but in relationship with one another. Um, and so that's the that's the underlying framework for all life, is that we have this differentiated order, and yet we're one. We human beings have the same essential being, but we're differentiated. Of course, not in the same way the Trinity is, but the same idea. You see it playing over and over again in and throughout created order. That's a great point. Um, oh, I'm skipped Joel. Joel said the language of living your best life, best self, and self actualization is a secular Gnosticism that is now infecting everything. Yeah, absolutely. And it's
I
funny,
got
how do you? Um,
I got really in trouble for saying that Revoice was essentially Gnostic.
oh, it's terribly
Um,
Gnostic, right?
and somebody was like, "It's not Gnostic. There's nothing Gnostic about it." And I was like, "Well, it it is though."
It's hard to think of another more blatant adoption of Gnostic categories than the LGBTQ movement,
Yeah,
whether they're celibate or not, and that's because of the inner self being the true self, right? If you can your inner identity is the golden true you, and everyone else and everything else, including your body, has to be conformed to it, um, and that's Gnosticism, Patrick. That's
yeah.
I'm
No,
sorry.
that's really
Yeah.
because whoever said that to me, I was so baffled. Like I didn't defend myself because I thought it was so manifestly true that I said it out loud, and then I was told to defend myself, and I kind of fell apart because you know, yeah, James, in what way is Revoice not Gnostic?
That's
Exactly. That's what I was like. I can't.
uh, the Hills say, unfortunately, they don't view the unborn as having person. Yeah, that's the problem. Is it's very arbitrary when the unborn person becomes a person. I mean, it depends on who you ask. Some will say, well, when they can survive on their own, whatever that means. I mean, who can
Yeah,
survive on his own? So I'm still,
yeah,
I'm not a person because I can't survive on my own. I mean, that's a category that didn't exist. Or when they break the birth, there's a great remember that video a couple of years ago. As soon as the baby passes through the birth canal,
yeah. And
before
they're wearing pink hair, and they're
yeah
like, "What are you,
before
a
the birth
baby?
canal, this is
Not a
nothing. It's
baby."
a clump of cells. After the birth canal, baby. It was a great video.
Those were great.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to her. Yeah.
Um,
Well, no, I can't find the. There was a section of this I wanted to read. I can't find it. Maybe I'll
I'm very
read.
impressed you're reading Jay Gratian, Jay, but
Why? You think I'm
because you
not
didn't
smart
like
enough
him in
to read?
seminary and you thought it was
Well, all my little marginalia, all the little things I wrote, like in that margin. Well, the first thing it says on the front page that I wrote, this was my copy. Don't write in this mess. That's the first thing I wrote on the page. And then I I was annoyed by how many times he used the word modern. But I mean, I didn't know, I was young. I didn't know anything.
Or
Um,
24 probably when you read that, when you read the
yeah.
23 or 24.
And I was a natural Christian. So I, obviously what he was saying was true. Like what, you know,
No, we were surrounded by the very people he was warning us about
yeah,
in seminary. And I love that book because of that reason. I thought,
that's
oh,
right. I
this
mean,
is
it's a
telling me
great
where
book.
this is our life.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
It's like he saw into our souls.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's really brilliant and it's funny and he's sarcastic. Um, but it's brilliant.
Uh,
Yeah, Love Thy Body is also a great book.
yeah. You read that. Don't
Did you
ask
ever read
mothers.
that?
I think I did. I think I had to. I think I listened to it. MA
I
says,
have.
don't ask mothers of newborns if their kids could survive on their own. Right. Right. Yeah. That's where that whole idea of autonomy breaks down as a standard for being a person. So the person in the hospital who's 95 who can't get up by himself is also not a person according to this view. It doesn't make sense.
Uh, I wanted to say that if I, have to do health class for my, homeschool health, the state requires the health credit or whatever. And so for our kids, they had to read 4 books. I think it was Love Thy Body, What She Ate, which was the food histories of 6 famous women. Just fun. Um, The Soul of Shame by Kurt Thompson, and then The Great Mortality, which is about the Black Death. And that's the health class that they had to take. And I feel like those are the perfect grouping of books for a young person to
Yeah, yeah.
think about.
I think I had a big that was very impactful.
Yeah,
On I think it really made a difference for their way they think and
yeah,
interpret the world. I mean, I just wish we could give that reading curricula to lots of children.
yeah.
Uh, like, oh, Paul Aronson says his grandfather knew Machen and has a signed hardcover copy edition of the Christianity and Liberalism. Wow, that's amazing. Um,
I have a signed copy of Adrian Plass's The Theatrical Tapes of Leonard Finn, which I feel like is almost equal in preciousness. So
John Wesley says Machen's indictment of public education as an agent of statist indoctrination. Wow, I forgot that. He was said that 100 years ago, and I mean, I bet 100 years ago, I bet he sounded like a conspiracy theorist 100 years ago saying that. Um, when now,
yeah, I mean, you get the sense like he's not baffled, but there was a really massive push to destroy, you know, ordinary Orthodox evangelicalism, you know, at the turn of the century.
yeah.
And it really took hold. Like the Episcopal Church was completely transformed by progressivism in the late 1800s, along with other things. It took a long time to get down to the ordinary person in the pew. But
Well, I mean, go read like some of the sermons for uh, uh, Philip Brooks, I think it was who's I think considered the father of the broad church movement, the Episcopal Church.
yes,
Um, and wow, his sermons are terrible.
yeah,
They're awful. Um, they they do try to make everything about ethics um, and kind of buy into the modernist view of the miraculous. Although it's not as he's kind of a moderate himself. He's not like what's the other guy? Fosdick. Uh, if you read the go a little, if you go back and read some of the sermons from turn of the century in mainline, what we consider
hmm
mainline churches, you'll find language that you say, oh, well, it's starting way back then. This is
yeah.
not a product of the '60s. This is a product of the 1890s. Um,
Well, I read sections of uh, what varieties of religious experiences. Um, is it Henry James? back in the day as well. And I'm very, very slowly reading Christopher Lash's um, book about liberalism. And he works through Henry James trying to wrap his mind around people actually believing in God, you know? It's like it it must have been a stew of crazy, intellectuals in the 1870s or whatever. Um, and I don't know. I don't think people expected that to really, there was no consequence to that. Like, cause society would always be ordered and good.
Right.
You could send your kid to a John Dewey run school where they pried the little soul out of your child and gave it to the state, there isn't going to be any consequence for that because we were all just going to keep going. And um, sure, we eventually had brutalism and then the Holocaust, and some bad things have happened. But it really isn't. There's no problem. Like, you can just totally evacuate Christian faith from Christianity, and society will just go fine. That's what people thought in the 1800s.
Well, it's not unlike what happens in philosophy when there began to be uh, Nietzsche was pointing
Yeah,
out that when when the West decided that there is no God or that he can't be part of the way that uh, we order our society, it didn't see it, but he said we've now that's our death knell because
yeah,
there's nothing holding us
there's
together.
nothing there.
And so when the same kind of pattern in theology, when the Christian elite, academic elite, decided to um, not take for granted the reliability and truthfulness of the scriptures and their historicity with regard to what they say about Jesus, with that turn where that became the majority view, well, you lost everything then. Yeah, then you no longer have Jesus. You might
Mhm.
think you have Jesus, and for a while you might think you can make it coast on Jesus ethics, even if Jesus wasn't a real person. But it doesn't. The wheels have come off.
It
Um,
was just like watching our ethics professor try to explain why you should still take care of old people instead of just killing them off. Like,
to a
which he
point.
couldn't do. He was
To a
like,
point. Well, no, he didn't say that. He said to a point, right?
yeah, as
When
long as their standard of life is reasonable.
in our ethics
Yeah,
professor at seminary said, okay, the value of life is determined by the goods of life. So,
yeah.
and that means can the person be in community? Can a person uh basically that was the main one. Can a person
Yeah.
be in community, right? And if a
And
person can't be in community and
who's
communicate with
to decide? That's just my question.
you should just off the guy, right? Because
Yeah. Well,
he's
they were
defeated.
offing Terry
We're
Schiavo
defeated.
at the time.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, that right. That's right. That
yeah.
Terry Calvo. Um,
While we were sitting in class,
right.
maybe my memory betrays me, but like, I feel
You're
like
right.
we were talking about, should we, if a person can't be in community, maybe it's time for them to die. And you go home and be like, you, you're standing there like, wait, when it's, what happens to you when you can't be in community? Who's to decide?
It wasn't there's guy. We have some comments to read. But wasn't there's guy in your one of your churches that was like really really old and bent over
Yes,
who was,
yes.
was
There
arguing
was this
for
guy he had like really bad osteoporosis. He was bent in half. And so you would feel sorry. You'd talk to him at coffee hour and you think, oh, this sweet old man, he's totally bent over. You talk to him for a couple of minutes and he begins to explain to you why the poor should be sterilized because they don't deserve to procreate. And this is an Episcopal church, of course, the poor man didn't believe in Jesus at all. And you'd be like, oh,
sir.
oh, sir, I think you shouldn't say You know, just this nice, sweet old man just spewing vile hatred for the poor, essentially. Uh,
Okay, so let's go back. So Joe Clark points out A Little Town of Bethlehem was written by Phillips Brooks, and that's right. Is that he was the one who wrote that hymn. Um, and then Kristen McGuire says, turning away from the Reformation of every Christian reading the lection every day to a mass-produced religion. Trying to think what that was about. Sorry, we should have read that earlier. So I don't have the context for that. But James Gibson, Brooks was not nearly as bad as Fosdick. Yeah, that's Fosdick is the guy I was thinking of who's worse, much worse. But if you really want to see some bad, read some homiletical schlock. See Henry Ward Beecher, whom Brooks called the greatest preacher Protestant has ever produced. Yeah, and I read one of his a pamphlet sermon. Someone at an antique shop brought me back a sermon preached by this Henry
is
Ward
he
Beecher.
the guy that was worried about rearranging the chairs in the little?
In
Maybe that
what?
was something else.
I don't.
Like he went to preach at a church, and he was like, "Oh, we can't have church. There are no chairs, and there's no piano, and
I don't know.
I can't." Maybe it was somebody else. I can't preach to these people because there's not a proper aisle, and the lectern is on the wrong side. Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else.
Maybe somebody else. Um, Bill Ruth said, "Remember Time Magazine's cover declaring God is dead." I don't remember it personally. I wasn't around, but I've heard of it. And yeah, the same Nietzsche declared it a long time ago because of the departure of the West from the moorings of Christendom. Why, Bethany? Why don't we just kill? Didn't we just kill all the old people during COVID? And then Bill Ruth said, "Cuomo tried.
Yeah,
He
he
did.
did. He did
Uh,
his darndest. He
yeah,
did his best. Hmm.
yeah, that was terrible."
Yeah, we lost our old people in our church
In nursing homes
in nursing homes. Yep, none of them made it out.
because Cuomo decided that would be the best place to put
The
uh,
ill.
the ill with COVID would be in the nursing homes. So
Yeah. Plus, they were isolated, so that was great for them.
yeah,
Speaking of being in community.
yeah. So did you want to talk about Roger Scruton?
Well, I'm thinking maybe we should save it. It's
Or
yeah, we've been going for almost an hour here. But I will link the video which Kristen sent me, which talks about how ugly when everything is so ugly.
why is everything
Which
so?
yeah, why is and what was nice about it is what to do. Like, we're looking at this terrible conflagration in Minnesota and other places. What should we do? He says you should make art for real. And but I think the along with that is you can just go back and believe in Jesus. Put it back together. Make sure you're doing it for real. Tell your neighbors about Jesus. You know, the only way back from hell is through the cross. So, you know, we don't need fancy special things, ideologies or
Well,
plans. Everybody has to go back and start over again, which is to believe in God, you know?
I'm thinking it was Carl Truman saying this. Maybe it was Roger Scruton. We should not talk about it. I think right, but I'll just make this one point: is that one telltale sign of Marxism is the eradication of beauty
Yeah.
because Marxists like if you're I think it was Scruton. If you're driving through the English countryside and you look around at the villages and the fields and you think, "Oh, this is beautiful," that's just because you're a bourgeois capitalist and need to be shot in the back of the head. The real thing is that's that could be a factory where
Mhm.
the people could be using these resources. And so beauty is an illusion foisted on you by the bourgeois to keep you from seeing how we can confiscate people's property and use it for the people, by which they mean
Yeah.
the vanguard of the party who are going to be. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Well,
anyway, if you're
if
wondering
you,
why, if you're wondering why, like, okay, I don't like the exploitation of women that goes on in media from, you know, as soon as we had televisions to, and before that too, all the way to the late '90s and early 2000s. But there was a conception of beauty that was there, right? There people recognized, oh, this is a beautiful person, and that it's no mistake that so the cultural Marxists gain ascendancy in the culture, they try to explode that. So you have to think that people who don't have the classic signs of beauty and who are dressed in ugly ways and have shaved their head bald, that's beauty. And there's the same kind of Marxist impulse. Beauty is a lie. It's not real, so you can't appreciate it, or else you're a bourgeois.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, all of that, and the way out from it is the way of resistance is this was Roger Scruton that gave me permission to do this, which I do when I drive anywhere in my town. Anytime I see something ugly, and I'm supposed to just be okay with it, I I say out loud how ugly it is. And I try to imagine the landscape without it there. What would it be like if we knocked this horrible fake Hilton
Yeah,
hotel that put really ugly things like nestled it into the hillside? Um, what would it be like if that wasn't there? It was Scruton that did that. That beauty is associated with truth. So the person who's desecrating everything that's beautiful is lying to you, and you have to uh, resist it. You have to say no in your own spirit. You have to say no and make something beautiful or find God or something like that. Um,
yeah,
and I thought that was really
yeah,
nice corrective to today. I think because it's disorienting, the ugliness is actually such a violation of the human person. And um, what he said in the video, I hope I'll remember to link it, is that the people who brought this about are unhappy with what has happened. You can see in the anger and the rage that the people who said this would be so good, once they found that this is how it was, they are not happy. And they need a way, people need a way out. You don't leave them in their ugliness. Uh, so,
thank you for the Beecher biography link, James Gibson. Appreciate that very much. Um, uh, MIA says, I do that when I'm reading stupid things like pregnant person or chest feeding. I say mother out loud, for example. Good. Good.
yeah, don't
Wow,
let it win.
we're almost
Yeah,
at
well,
80 people, and that's pretty amazing.
oh, oh wow. Well, and we're also at an hour
Yeah.
mark, and so I'm going to read the comments, which I didn't do on Friday, and I'm actually thinking that I might just be better on Mondays. You can go shopping. I'll read the comments, and then the week can go on. So anyway, thank you all for coming to this week's live stream. It's great to see your names and your comments, and we will see you online in the usual way for the rest of the week. Bye, everyone. Stay warm.